Okay, question 2, again from the student-submitted questions. What criteria does the Board of Visitors use to measure presidential success, and in what ways did President Nickel fail to meet those standards?
It's a really hard, complex job. A modern president has many, many facets. They include the things that I think probably many of this community respond well to: an ability to work with multiple and very different and varied constituencies, unquestionably a strong academic commitment to ideas and a commitment to a faculty and the freedom for the faculty to do and have the resources to do what they need, a deep commitment to students and student life. Those are certainly critical things, and by the way, they were critical things in evaluation. The president also is an executive leader. It's a school of a $250 million budget that the president manages and develops and submits for approval. So there's a financial element not only to the day-to-day running of the school to run operationally sound and efficient, but more importantly in an academic environment, and I would say for a public school and worse, a school in William and Mary's situation, you better be a very good fundraiser. Less than 20% of the operating income, if I have these facts right, for this college come from the state. We can call ourselves public, but we thrive only because we have private resources. The state is not a reliable partner on even the 17% we get. The rest comes from your tuition, which you have to have a good fundraiser so that it doesn't go sky high. A quick way to fix the problems is move everyone's tuition to $45,000, right? You'd solve your problem. But if you're trying to protect opportunity and access for students by keeping tuition as under control as you can, then you know that source has a limited capacity. The rest comes from being able to go out, raise, and collect the resources to build an endowment to make sure the school survives for centuries. Your competitors are way ahead of us. Now, I don't know if you think Harvard's your competitor, but if you have a $40 billion endowment, we're not in your league. We can celebrate our $500 million endowment, but Harvard's on the verge of essentially letting kids go for free. Stanford just announced that if you make less than $100,000, you can go to Stanford for free. How does the school compete with a financial aid system that allows schools to essentially subsidize the college education for kids to a level that's even cheaper than our in-state public tuition? So you can't afford to be deficient on the fundraising front, and you can't afford to be deficient on having a strong forward-looking plan about financial security at William & Mary. The new science building wouldn't be there, the new education building wouldn't be there, the Jamestown dorms wouldn't be there if all of that hadn't come through. So that's an important criteria. When you run something this big, you have to have a very good, solid, strategic and operational planning process. You can't run things with a little here and a little there. They have to be integrated into some kind of coherent direction so that staff, faculty, students, your board, alumni, legislators know where you're going, know with some clarity what your objectives are as an institution. A good example, Gateway, one of the finest programs I've ever seen. How much does it cost? And oh, by the way, if that's $80 million to endow, which is the number that I've heard, in order to guarantee its promises for the number of students it wants to take on, and you're going to have a faculty research initiative, and that's $25 million. You can't do these things sporadically without giving some thought to how they integrate holistically, or you're going to break all of them. I mean, the biggest heartbreaking thing to me would be if Gateway makes big promises, brings a bunch of wonderful kids to the school, and in the third year falls apart, right? And so much for the dream because it collapsed under financial insecurity. So, you know, strategic and operational planning are a critical part about what a modern president has to be about. You have to run a staff. Whether you know it or not, somebody's working on keeping these lights on and the heating and whether the grounds are right. Or by the way, after Virginia Tech, one of the most profound and difficult things we ever did is, what's our emergency response system? What's our risk analysis and evaluation system? We went through 6 difficult months with the Vice President of Students, Sam Sadler, and the president and us on what would we do if this happened here? How vulnerable? So president is responsible for those things. Those were in the criteria. So I don't know how to give you a complete laundry list, but this is some flavor of what's required. And the problem is you can't be perfect, right? There's no person out there I've ever met who could somehow be A+ on every one of these dimensions, right? That's not the standard. or there's nobody who can meet them. But it's also not enough to say, well, if you're A+ on 2/5 of the equation, the others can be 1. Can be a low score. You'd fail the exam on that process. You wouldn't pass the SAT by just maxing one part of it. It has to be. And then the other thing I think we worked on was, if you have deficiencies, they can be solved. But will you be willing to reorganize the administration of the school or to bring in resources to compensate for your weaknesses? And there was a long process in which the board had identified managerial deficiencies and made proposals on how those could be fixed, because they were not the president's strong suit. One of the strongest things we offered was to hire a chief operating officer for the college. The University of Virginia has one. Virginia Tech has one, in which the president is relieved of some of the kind of day-to-day managerial and executive stuff that sort of consumes them, so that they're freer to do the things that they do well. Unfortunately, we did not have a success, in our opinion, in convincing him to take that approach to changing management structure in order to address those things. And he'll have to his credit, he'll make an argument about why he didn't. But we thought that was becoming critical. So it's tough for me to give you, every little thing that we looked at, but I hope that gives some flavor of what we looked at, and we looked at very, very intensely. You might look at the record and come to a different conclusion. I'd be the first to admit to that too. But that is what we focused on, that is how we did it, and that is what ultimately led to our conclusion.